Good evening, everyone. This is the ARTARIA String Quartet. I'm Ray Shows, joined by Nancy Oliveros, Annalee Wolf, and Patty Ryan. And we are here to show an exciting Rochberg performance and program tonight with guest artists. But I just wanted to welcome everybody to the concert tonight, and thank you for coming. And we have some upcoming events that Nancy's going to tell us about. I can't hear either.
Outside of the Reich Performing Arts Center. We've got a concert. Can you hear me?
I can't hear either.
I think you got to start all over, Nancy.
Start over. You were muted. Yep.
Performing Arts Center. Okay, so got a concert. Can you hear me?
I think you got to start all over, Nancy.
Hang on, guys. Hang on, everybody. I've got to mute one thing. Okay, great. Okay. I'm here. Okay, that's okay. So Sunday night we're playing our first outdoor concert outside of Annalee's beautiful home out in St. Louis Park. We're going to be outside, and we've had some rehearsals going on the last couple of weeks outside on her deck, and it's exciting to be able to play together again. It's just so great, even though we're 10 feet apart, and there's all kinds of wildlife out there and wonderful insects that we're getting to know. But besides that, Thursday, we are driving up to Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and we're playing a drive-in concert up in Grand Rapids. We will be on the loading dock outside of the Reich Performing Arts Center Thursday evening at 7, and our audience will be in their cars enjoying our performance, I hope. And so we're excited about that. And then August, the plan is August 14th, a live streamed possibly, but a live performance in the backyard of our wonderful hosts, Diane Moore and Bob Jordan in St. Paul. So hopefully you can join us for those things.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Nancy. We are now going to transition over to Rochberg and put Patty on the spot here as she tells us what we're doing tonight.
So we're going to talk a little bit about George Rochberg and his third string quartet. A longtime proponent of serialism, Rochberg abandoned the compositional style in favor of tonality upon the death of his 20-year-old son of a brain tumor in 1964. Rochberg found serialism at this point to be an inadequate means for him to express his grief, and his use of tonality first became widely known at the Concord Quartet's premiere of his third string quartet in 1972, which sparked controversy in the music composition world. The composition structure of the third string quartet can be broken down into 3 parts with 5 total movements. The piece is performed attacca, meaning without pause, except between each part. Part 1 contains 2 movements, the Introduzione, Fantasia, and March. And the Introduzione is kind of a struggle between tonality and atonality. The March has Bartók influences scattered throughout that movement. Part B contains 1 movement of variations. It's a pretty hefty sized movement with a lot of Beethoven influences. Harmonically and polyphonically is based around the classical and romantic era. And the final part, part C, has the final 2 movements, which is a march, again, thematically connected to the second movement, but further developed, and the finale, Scherzos and Serenades, which is internally palindromic in form, alternating between Scherzos and Serenades. And the entire quartet concludes with a recurring theme from the first movement. So, the Concord String Quartet. The Concord String Quartet, active from 1971 to 1987, were pioneers of furthering American contemporary chamber music alongside the great standard repertoire of the string quartet canon. During their 16 years together, they performed over 1,000 concerts, 36 Beethoven cycles, 18 Bartók cycles, 50 premieres of contemporary composers, and were artists in residence at Dartmouth College. The members, Mark Sokol on first violin, Andrew Jennings on second, John Kokonowski on viola, and Norman Fisher on cello, not only shaped the chamber music world, but also are leading chamber music pedagogues as professors at Rice University, University of Michigan, Vanderbilt University, and until Mark's passing, at San Francisco Conservatory of Music, which is where I first found my introduction to the Concords. We are honored to have with us tonight Andrew and Norman to share their insights on Rochberg and the Third String Quartet. Welcome, guys. It's so nice to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Great to be here.
We had a little bit of some technical difficulties. So at this point, this is how we are doing this sort of Russian doll situation of technology.
Yeah, I'm here in my office, and Andy is FaceTiming from his office to my office from Michigan. I'm in Houston. It's one of these wonderful little things that we can do with technology.
So he's not captive the whole time of the year like this.
Well, no, he lives now in my iPad.
I took up residence there. It's a lot cheaper than paying rent.
Yeah, but he can't get COVID-19 in Houston.
Oh,
right. All right. Can you walk us through the
Yeah. Go ahead, Patty.
Can you walk us through the process of discovering Rochberg and the genesis of his Third String Quartet? And, kind of where were you in your career at this point in 1971? And how did you meet George?
Okay. There are lots of questions there, Patty.
Sorry.
Should I pick this? Should I start with this, Andy?
Why don't you were the first to make, face-to-face contact.
Our quartet started rehearsing on May 28th in 1971.
Oh my God.
And
you remember the date?
Yeah, I do. And we had, before we even had our first rehearsal, we had a contract to do 3 vinyl records of American contemporary music, and we had all scoured around to get concerts for the quartet. So we were playing a lot of concerts, and by the time that December rolled around, we had won the Naumburg Chamber Music Award, and part of that. So that was December. It was just a few months, or what, I don't know, what's that, 6 months or something like that after we started. And part of that came with the commission of a new work. We had to get right on this because our New York debut that was the following May of 1972. So we were only giving a composer a few months to put something together. And we decided on Rochberg based on what we knew of his work, which was this absolutely dynamic string quartet number 2, which was completely serialized, tremendous beauty, passion, power, highly virtuosic. Half of the piece is quartet alone. The material, there's a big break in the middle, and then the piece happens again with a soprano singing. And all the material is revisited with all the material transformed. It's a great work. So Rochberg accepted the challenge. And when we went to visit, my wife's parents lived in New Jersey, and we were down there for Christmas and decided that we would drive over and meet George and Jean Rochberg. And just so we could make a connection. And it was an incredible day. We had a beautiful lunch, and George was incredibly excited about this project. And he played for us his carnival music, which was one of the first pieces where he tried doing a polystylistic kind of a thing where there's a blues movement and a rag, and it's just, it's dynamite, but it's carnival music. So it's meant to be sort of slightly sardonic and that sort of thing. And then, and I was scratching my head a little bit, said, gee, this doesn't sound so much like that second quartet. And so we were asked to, before we'd even seen or knew anything about the third quartet, that we had to come up with a program for our Tully Hall debut. Right. And so we figured that maybe the Rochberg would probably be, 10, 15 minutes maybe, because, of course, he didn't have that much time to write it. And, right. And so we decided that we would open with a 30-minute Dvorak American, and we would conclude with a 30-minute Hindemith quartet.
Which one? Which one did you play?
Well, it's now the third quartet.
Ah, yeah.
It's the one before that everybody knows.
Yeah. Right. So it's the Opus 16.
Right.
So it's in C is that quartet. So and it was a piece that we wound up having to learn because they needed a piece that was written in 1921. So we learned that piece, and then we wound up playing it a lot. It's a dynamic work and everything else. So that was going to be our closing piece. So then all of a sudden, George was writing like a madman, and in March, he said, I feel like I need to send you some material so you can start looking at it and get an idea of what it is. And so he sent each of us large manuscript paper it's about and it was score. It was about, 3 inches thick, something like that. And then we looked at it. We said, this is amazing. What is this? And he said, it's the last movement. Right. We said, how long is that? He says, it's 20 minutes. And we said, the last movement out of how many? He says, that's the fifth movement.
Whoa.
That was just the, Scherzos and Serenades and this kind of stuff. So we were absolutely flabbergasted. And so we obviously started working on it as much as we possibly could.
It's such an easy movement.
We had no idea. Yeah, it's just an easy movement. And we had no idea exactly what was going to be in front of us. So we were working so hard to try to learn it and to play it as well as possible because, of course, this was our debut. And so it never occurred to us that we were playing a kind of a groundbreaking, radical piece that was going to essentially have a kind of a rite of spring premiere,
right.
And the kind of reaction that we would get from it. We were just excited to be able to be playing it. And we actually...
I wish that I'd had a video of that first session reading off that score. We were in a little room at a church that it was a kindergarten room, and so we spread out these huge scores across these tables, that are about shin height for the kindergartners. As we started to read through it, it was wait a minute, this is C major. This can't be. Something's wrong here. What are we doing? It's a fugue I just heard.
Yeah, right.
What is going on here? So
yeah.
Well, that kind of brings me to another question. What was the process of working on this piece like? How much of the was he just giving you music and then you just learned it, or was there a lot of interplay between I think this might be a little bit better, or because none of that.
No, I think that we were, of course, working very hard, but also there was a certain amount of perplexity, coming from where he had come. There was the question of, is this serious? Is this a spoof? What is this? And so finally, we just said to George, look, we're working really hard on this piece. Could you come and help us? And so he showed up at Norm's house, and we spent, I think, 3 days with him, something like that, around the clock. I think maybe the most intense 3 days I've ever had in my life. And by the end of that, we knew this was no joke. This was really serious stuff. George was one of the most passionate people you could imagine. And there was simply no question that he was doing something quite dramatic with this piece. Mm-hmm. There was always give and take, always, have you tried this? Have you tried that? That went on, we played that piece for him for years. Every time we played it, he would show up, or he might show up. We didn't know, and he would want to do different things, and we'd say, no, we want to do it this way, and he said, no, I'm right. I know how it goes.
Well, and he'd keep changing the tempo.
Right.
And so he'd say, you guys are getting too comfortable.
Not like 82 to 84, but like 82 to 130.
Right.
He said, you've learned it. It's too comfortable. I needed to be on the edge. It needs to be faster now, And then, that happened several times on some of those fast movements.
Oh,
yeah, my
last
goodness.
movement. Yeah.
Yeah, the last movement, the fugue, for example.
Right.
Was
what
he wanted faster and faster.
Right. So I guess maybe you answered my other question which is when George was with you for those 3 days is when you realized that this was a masterpiece.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And it
culminated, his energy, as Andy was mentioning, his energy, passion was so incredibly inspiring, but it drew out of us a whole other level of energy and commitment. He pressed us and pushed us to much higher musical planes, and just reach for this and do something more passionate, more personal, more committed, and it was incredibly inspiring.
Yeah,
I mean, I have
people who were going to play it cool.
Yeah,
and he made lots of enemies as a result of that because he just wasn't interested, and. So we took the gauntlet and that he'd thrown down, and we ran with it, and it was quite a journey. So, as you know, probably resulted in that was the first of the commissions, but quartet number 3, but also quartets 4, 5, 6, and 7, piano quintet, and a cello quintet were all commissions that he wrote for us.
Is there a relationship between those to the third, do you think? Or were they all sort of very differently composed for you?
Well, the piano quintet was actually conceived in a radio show. We were doing a radio show of the carnival music that Jerry Lowenthal was playing, and the third quartet that we were doing. And at a sort of alcohol-fueled lunch afterwards, there was a proposal that he write a quintet for us. And, we just kind of assumed, oh, yeah, right, well, that's something nice to say after lunch. But it became a reality. And those two pieces are actually very closely related in a lot of ways. Material, energy,
structure,
size, structure, all of it's very similar.
Right.
The others are much further afield.
Yeah, but it was sort of like once George, I'd like to think that the third quartet is like a declaration of independence. Mm-hmm. It has that same complete, this is my credo, this is what I believe, this is what music is, this is what needs to be done now. We need to put the neuroses of the past in a box and become human beings again. It was really incredibly passionate. But so all the works, in a sense, that come after that have this sense of being released, and so they have take different stances on that, but still the power of mixing tonal, non-tonal music into the same thing, and when you start hearing this stuff, it all sounds like Rochberg.
Right.
It's not like he's making a pantomime or a parody of something else. It's all Rochberg and recognizable as such.
That must be such a careful.
From the standpoint of 2020, is 1970, the musical world was very, very different than it is now. In a lot of ways, this piece, this third quartet, and the ones that followed it, have shaped American music right to its root. Because in 1970, you went to concerts and you had to study the score and you had to figure out what everything meant, and every composer came with a glossary of, this sign means rub your bow against the side of the bridge and scream some obscenity and something like that.
Well, one of the favorite things that we would hear frequently also is that in that time, well, I'm going to need to hear this 2 or 3 times before I know what to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a common comment that we'd get after some of these things, because there was no way to actually perceive what was going on. Complexity, it didn't make sense, and you had to hear it many, many times before it would start to make sense, is what the audience would say. So nobody could really make a judgment on it in a sense. And so on the one hand, like a lot of great art, I mean, it has an impact immediately. Rochberg's music has an impact immediately, and then it just deepens with greater familiarity. Yeah.
And Patty, I think you mentioned also a little bit about the premiere, but that was truly an amazing evening, because when it was over, it was packed with a lot of people who were involved in the new music scene from that time, interested to hear what George was up to. And half of them were on their feet groveling and going crazy, and half of them were booing and hissing and walking out. And so it really was quite reminiscent, I would imagine, of what the Rite of Spring did. It really provoked people. George loved that. He just loved the fact that people weren't just sitting there saying, gee, I want to hear it again, which means I hope I never have to hear that again.
So the other thing that happened, which was, you guys that in the quartet would appreciate this, right? Because already it was like almost 2 hours of music, right? And so this was at the intermission. There were all these heated arguments going on at intermission, and they kept going on. They couldn't get the audience back into the hall. So the intermission went on for 25 minutes, and then when we finished the Hindemith, and the audience was on their feet and cheering, and they only let us take one bow, because the stagehands would have to get overtime if we took a second bow.
Oh my God. That's incredible.
That's amazing.
A little inside story on that, but it was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Totally. Do you think that this particular quartet made a ripple effect in the composer world after its premiere?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit more about?
Well, I remember with one of the composers that we had on commission, who was also writing a work for the Metropolitan Opera at the time, and hearing this piece stopped him dead in his tracks, and he said, "I have to really completely rethink what I'm doing." He was a really prominent composer, and this happened to a lot of people. And it basically said, okay, rethink what you're doing. I mean, you can actually write the music you want to write, instead of having to feel that you have to write to a convention of what is complex music to make it feel like you're an intelligent person. It was a huge, huge effect.
I mean, it's hard to find any music written since then that doesn't owe something of its vocabulary to George.
Sure.
Whether people bought into it, it's very interesting, because in 1970, the people writing the most conservative music were in England. In England, it was okay to write tonal music. It was fine. And now that we've switched over in this country, now the English are the sort of avant-gardists. So they do everything they can to sort of not do what we're doing.
Sure. It's fair. So I'll leave you with one final question, which is, now this is just shy of 50 years since the premiere. Has your sorry, not to put a timestamp. Have your perspectives
Can you speak up here? I can't quite hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah, right.
Has your perspective on the third string quartet changed over the years in the context of music that's happened since? Or in a sense, have you been able to enjoy watching the life of this composition?
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking for myself, you know, I was worried that because we did so many performances of it. Andy, do you remember how many performances we did of the third quartet?
Not a clue.
Okay.
Probably
Well,
50, 60, something like that.
yeah, I mean, it was a lot. And we were doing them. Yeah, he's got a record of it, but we could look it up. But there were so many performances, and the record was so successful, and it was such a big draw, but it became so stamped it was our piece. I was worried that other people wouldn't play it, and after we didn't play it so much at the end of our career, and then a few other quartets were picking it up, but I was concerned that it wouldn't get traction. And then now we would hear a quartet would do it here, and then another one would do it there. And so it seems like it's been picking up quite a bit. And then you guys, I just loved hearing you guys play it. It was such fun.
Hey,
because
I have a question for you, Norm. I was going to ask you about your teaching of this piece, because we were inspired, you guys being our teachers, obviously with Patty being the spark plug on this. And thank you, Patty, for introducing us to this piece. It reconnects us with Norman and company, and when we back in the day. But how many times have you actually taught this over the years? Have you been able to get young groups to play this at Tanglewood and Rice and Michigan and places like that, guys?
Rockford 5 you've done, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've done several cycles of the Concord quartets, 4, 5, 6. Third, we did. Andy and I were both involved in coaching the third quartet with the Fromm players at Tanglewood, and Telegraph Quartet. Didn't they pick that up too?
Yeah.
Yes, that's I think the first time. Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah, and then I was involved with a group at Rice that was interested in taking it on. It's so big that it occupies a big space on a program.
Yes.
But it's a tremendous experience, and of course it feels like it could be an entire concert because of the journey that it travels.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a group in London that has been playing it, and I think some of the other later quartets have also had some traction simply because they're slightly smaller projects.
Sure.
So it's easier to fit a 20 or 22-minute piece into a program than to try to figure out somehow what do you pair with a 45-minute piece. We often played in two-piece programs. That piece
and Carter 1, which is a nice light piece too.
Right.
But
I
no,
think
we
Nancy
did
has
we did a whole bunch of performances of when I would play the Ricordanza with George to open a program, and then we would play the third quartet, and then close the program with 130 in the fugue of Beethoven.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Why couldn't I have been there?
Yeah, but that was
going on. I don't know.
Yeah.
Norm, I've got a question for you, or Norm and Andy. What year did your recording come out of this piece?
It was we recorded it the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of Thanksgiving week in 1972.
Right.
And then the recording came out in 1973, beginning of the year.
Well, I have to say that in 1973, my older brother was a music student at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he drove home with your album to La Crosse, where I was a little girl, and he raced into the house, and he sat me down in front of the record player, and he said, "Nancy, you have to listen to this."
How about that?
That was the first really serious modern quartet I had ever heard in my life. I was very young. I was about 14, 15. And I was so impressionable. And we sat there and pored over that recording. And I just can't tell you all the years since then. I still have the record player. I still carry that around, every time we move somewhere or whatever. And just the fact that I got to play it for you and members of the Concord Quartet and study it with you and all of that is just meaningful. Just meaningful for me.
That's a wonderful story, Nancy.
Very touching.
Yeah.
Well, shall we get on to the performance for tonight, and then maybe meet at the Zoom room if you guys want to hang out with us there? That would be
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one final thing,
Sure.
which is that when you were talking about what George impressed onto you when you're studying the piece, which was, reaching for more, asking for more, all that stuff. It basically, I just wanted to say to the two of you, and of course Mark, that is absolutely what was impressed upon me as being your students. And I just want to say thank you so much for being such amazing pedagogues, mentors, and people.
Ditto.
Thank you, Patty. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to the music.
Let's hear it.
Here's Artaria's, I think, second performance of this piece from last year, and it times out at about 46 and a half minutes. Thank you both. Here we go.
Oof.
Woo! Wow. I forgot how
fun.
much work. That was totally fun. Oh my gosh. Amazing. What? Wow. Listen. I forgot how much work. That was totally fun. Hey, thank you, audience, for coming and being part of what we think is an epic moment for us, a watershed moment for the quartet. And I think we all look forward to playing that piece again. And also, I would like to do Rochberg 6. It's got some interesting things in it, and we can also talk to the guys that it was written for by quickly giving them phone calls. So anyway, thank you again to those that donated, and some of you very generously. We appreciate that very, very much. And we're about to head over to the Zoom party room, which is open now at this point. I think Norm Fisher's already there.
Before we do, just wanted to give a couple thank yous once again to Norman Fisher and Andrew Jennings for being part of the genesis of this piece, and then also for being here tonight. And also, as always, thank you, Bob and Diane, for being such gracious donors for us. Yeah.
Absolutely. We look forward to our next appointment with the Inside the Music events in August. The date is set for August 14th. That may adjust a little bit, but for sure, we'll let you all know, and sign up to be on our mailing list and be one of our subscribers so that you'll know what's going on. So anyway, thank you all. We'll see you over in the Zoom room. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.